Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Charles Allen, the Ward 6 council member and chair of the council's Committee on Transportation and the Environment. Today is Wednesday, June 25th, 2025. We're meeting both in room 500 of the historic John A. Wilson building and on the Zoom virtual platform. We do have a quorum consisting of myself and my colleagues at large, Councilmember Christina Henderson, Ward 4, Councilmember Janice Lewis-George, which makes up our quorum. And I believe we'll be joined shortly by Ward 5 Councilmember Zachary Parker, who is joining us virtually. Actually, hang on one second to make sure we're adding him as a panelist now. There we go. Thank you very much. All right, and the time is now 12:35 p.m. I'm calling to order this additional meeting of the committee. Today, the committee will consider and vote on 4 items: the report and recommendations of the Committee on Transportation and the Environment on FY 2026 budget for agencies under its purview, as well as 3 DC water resolutions, PR 26-171, which would appoint Robert Hawkins to be a board of director member. I guess I should probably read the actual title of the resolution for this. So PR 26-171, the DC Water and Sewer Authority Board Directors Robert Hawkins Confirmation Resolution of 2025. PR 26-173, the District of Columbia Water and Sewer Authority Board of Directors Dr. Jimmy Ortiz Confirmation Resolution of 2025. And PR 26-174, the District of Columbia Water and Sewer Authority Board of Directors Dr. Alexandra McPhail Confirmation Resolution of 2025. We will discuss and vote on our fiscal year 2026 budget report and recommendations first, and then we will turn to discuss and vote on our 3 DC Water Board nominees. So just 4 weeks have elapsed since the mayor submitted her budget to the council. In a very condensed timeline, this committee held 5 budget oversight hearings, during which the committee received live testimony from about 150 public witnesses. The committee also received 171 submissions of written public testimony. Clearly, this was a budget that people felt passionately about, and that was palpable not only during each of our hearings, but while walking the halls of the Wilson building or whenever I was out in the community. Of course, budgets are neither developed or released in a vacuum, and before I turn to the specifics of this year's budget, I want to lay out the very challenging context for this budget as it involves every branch of DC's government. Back in February, the district's chief financial officer released an official revenue estimate predicting lower revenues for the district over the next 4 years, which reduced the local revenue forecast for each year of the financial plan significantly. Specifically, for FY 26 through 29, the local revenue forecast was revised downward by an average of $342.1 million each year. With the federal government significantly shrinking its workforce, the CFO also estimated a decrease in income and consumption and a corresponding loss in sales and income tax revenue. And as if that wasn't enough on its own, on March 14th, 2025, Congress passed a continuing resolution, or CR, which funded the federal government operations through the end of the fiscal year, but omitted a longstanding provision that allows the district to continue to spend as planned in the most recent budget cycle. As a result of that omission, the CR required the district government to reduce its FY 25 spending levels, so what was approved in FY 24, a reduction totaling $1.13 billion. I want to be clear to anyone who's watching at home, those are not federal dollars. They are ours. These are local dollars, the income and sales tax that you and I pay to the district. That money was and still is being held hostage. The irony, of course, is the district has passed a balanced budget for 29 straight years, including 28 clean financial audits. So I'd say we've been doing pretty well. Congress, of course, hasn't passed a balanced budget in over 2 decades and has the gall to restrict the district from spending our own money. Beyond the downward revenue forecast and the addition to the pressures resulting from congressional interference, the district also has had to grapple with $161 million in internal spending pressures. As well as in response to that congressional action or inaction, the city administrator had to issue City Administrator Order 2025-1, instituting a hiring freeze across most of government, which has hit every agency within this committee's purview, as well as restricting things like promotions and raises, travel, training, and other non-essential expenditures. That's relevant to the budget as it informed a lot of our action around vacancies. Because of all those complications, the budget came to us much later in the year than normal. At this time last year, we were actually casting the final vote on the Budget Support Act. So we had to move through this year's budget process quickly because of a new fiscal year is just a couple of months away. The budget still needs to go through its first and second reading, the mayor's review, congressional approval before the district agencies can access that funding. So it's in this context, the mayor had submitted her FY 26 proposed budget to the council for its review. The mayor has branded this budget as a Grow DC and transformational growth agenda for the District of Columbia that, quote, cuts red tape and reduces barriers to growth, end quote. But in the purported service of growth, the mayor's FY 26 proposed Local Budget Act and Budget Support Act work together to water down the district's investments in and legal commitments to sustainable energy generational, building efficiency, carbon neutrality, reduced greenhouse gas emissions. And those are not in the ways that directly benefit our businesses or job growth. In fact, half of the witnesses that testified at the budget hearing were contractors and local businesses, green infrastructure managers, small nonprofits, and more. who these cuts would directly harm. Many of the cuts proposed for the next 4 fiscal years were first suggested in last year's proposed budget. But if the FY25 proposed budget signaled a wavering commitment to our climate and community-oriented goals, the FY26 proposed budget in BSA represents a big kick of the can. The single line item that best encapsulated the district's retreat from environmental goals and generated the most testimony and opposition was the FY26 proposed budget of $71 million sweep from the Sustainable Energy Trust Fund. This is a fund that allows the Department of Energy and Environment to support sustainable energy projects, fund home electrification efforts, to assist affordable housing developers in complying with building efficiency requirements. A lot of these dollars are spent to ensure older homes, often passed down from generation to generation, so they can modernize and upgrade their key systems for heating and cooling and cooking. DOE also uses the fund to build new energy renewable generation within the district, which benefits district residents with reduced electricity bills that could lower the amount of energy we have to source from the regional network. This network is currently experiencing so much demand that it has the highest prices in the nation, and DC residents are all paying $20 more a month on their Pepco bills. For the second year in a row, the mayor has now rated the SCTF to cover the district's energy costs. If you were keeping track at home, that's close to $140 million swept in 2 years. I've heard it said this budget makes tough choices and avoids raising taxes. I disagree. I think it's taking money that should be ensuring more low-income households are now stuck with higher utility bills, a tax increase, all the same. In addition to the sweep of SCTF, the mayor cut $7.4 million in local funds from DOE and swept $1.9 million from the Anacostia River Cleanup and Protection Fund, which will lead to wide-ranging impacts on DOE contractors, small grants for environmental education nonprofits, and small and local businesses that work closely with DOE. In sum, the FY26 proposed budget would reduce DOE's budget by a stunning $77 million from the agency's FY25 funding levels. That is the largest cut by amount that any district agency received under the FY26 proposed budget. It is the most dramatic divestment from climate and environmental commitments in district history. But even this is the best case scenario for the agency. Should the uncertainty or delays associated with federal funding continue, the ultimate reduction in funds for the agency could be much worse, approaching or exceeding 30 to 40% of prior funding levels. Unfortunately, we could not complete a restoration of the staggering SCTF cuts. We did restore $3.1 million in funding to replenish the SCTF balance in FY26, with a total of $5.3 million reallocated to SCTF over the financial plan. The committee recommendations direct that the restored funds go toward the implementation of Healthy Homes mandate passed by this council last year, and we will work with the full council to identify more funding to put back into the SCTF. We're also going to ensure DC residents understand this cut. Starting in October, your Pepco bill will now reflect the percentage of that $2 fee they pay, which goes to SCTF and goes to paying the district government's power bills. I'm happy to report that we were able to completely restore cuts of $1.9 million to the Anacostia River Cleanup Fund, fully reversing the mayor's sweep across the financial plan. This funding that benefits many DC residents. It creates less trash in the river, it funds jobs and programs that employ DC residents, and it helps expose our school children to the importance of our waterways, some of whom are growing up near the river without ever having actually engaged with it. DOE was not the only agency cut as part of the mayor's growth agenda, as the Green Finance Authority, or the DC Green Bank, also saw a significant reduction. Specifically, the mayor's FY26 proposed budget slashes the annual contribution from the SCTF to the Green Bank in half, from $7 million in FY25 to just $3.5 million in FY26. The Green Bank has been able to match every dollar of public funding with $14 of private partner financing, with hundreds of millions of dollars of impact in the district, representing a tremendous return on investment. Of the 8 active construction projects in the district large enough to require a crane on our skyline, 4 are supported with financing from the DC Green Bank, a sign of its importance in providing gap financing for housing as private capital investment has frozen. The committee report sadly is unable to undo the $3.5 million reduction to the annual contribution the bank receives from the SCTF. However, over the past several months, the committee's been discussing with the Green Bank what kind of investment it would take for the bank to become self-sufficient. As a bank, the Green Bank doesn't just expend money like a typical agency, but it manages a portfolio of loans on which it generates its own revenue. And at about $100 million, the Green Bank would have enough capital to support its own operations in perpetuity without any new contributions from the district, and while still serving as a catalyst for private investment in sustainable energy, building efficiency, and affordable housing. Assuming even the current annual contribution of $3.5 million holds, there's no reason to think the mayor won't try to lower it in our future budgets. It would take the Green Bank a decade to hit that threshold. So as an alternative, the Green Bank has recently explored whether it could reach the $100 million capitalization threshold through a bond issuance or some other financial instrument. If that were possible, the Green Bank could achieve financial independence faster while substantially expanding the size of its portfolio and, by extension, the public funding available to fuel private investment. So to support the Green Bank's pursuit of this option, the committee report has set aside $250,000 for capacity building and planning at the Green Bank related to a bond issuance. The mayor has proposed watering down or repealing many of these laws in prior budget support acts, and I'm pleased to say that where the cost to strike the mayor's proposal were non-existent or minimal, the committee report has done so. The committee reports completely strikes the subtitles repealing the parking cash-out law and allowing for the continued purchase of gas vehicles for the district fleet. The transportation sector is the second leading contributor to emissions, so it's important that employers incentivize the use of sustainable transportation options, and the district leads a transition to electric vehicles. But the sector that leads the way in total emissions is our building sector, which is why I'm happy to say the committee report strikes the subtitles that would pause the requirements of the BEPS program and would water down net zero standards. A special thanks to Councilor Lewis George's committee for their collaboration on the net zero subtitle and for working with DGS to get a more accurate representation of the costs associated with maintaining net zero requirements. This committee has worked collaboratively with a variety of building and clean energy leaders to make thoughtful reforms to the BEPS program. As recently as a few months ago, this council approved changes that were the product of hard work by our BEPS task force. In that vein, the committee report proposes transferring $173,000 to the Committee of the Whole to fund a senior manager position within the Department of Buildings to help assist with green building issues, including the Green Building Advisory Council and agency consultation with BEPS and net zero compliance with private buildings. However, the committee report is unable to undo all the proposed changes in the BSA. As I mentioned before, the mayor eliminated dedicated funding for the DC SCU and the DC Green Bank. While the committee report does not identify sufficient funding to preserve the current funding level, the report proposes to establish new dedicated funding levels based on DOE's most current spend plan. Under the modified subtitle, the DC SCU will receive $19.8 million in FY26 and $10 million in FY27 and beyond for its base contract, and $4.1 million in FY26 and $8.5 million in FY27 and beyond for contract administration. The committee report also sets aside a $3.5 million minimum annual contribution to the Green Bank, again, matching the funding levels proposed in the mayor's budget. The committee report also does not propose forcing the district to re-enter compliance with the renewable energy portfolio standards, the requirement that a certain percentage of energy sold in the district comes from renewable sources, and solar in particular. Last year, the mayor exempted the district from RPS compliance to save the district money on its power bills. In effect, the legal change allowed the district to be held to a lower standard than it holds generally with respect to energy consumption. While the committee did not get an official FIS on the costs of re-entering RPS compliance, an initial estimate from the CFO was north of $15 million per year. There's simply not enough funding available to cover those costs, so the committee report proposes accepting the subtitle as proposed, and we should strive to hold our government to the same standard we ask every private resident and business to meet the renewable portfolio standard as ratepayers. The committee report, however, would modify the subtitle to maintain the ban on purchasing substandard renewable energy credits. Finally, while the committee report does reflect the full and unconditional mandate included in Healthy Homes Law passed last year, we do maintain the timeline of the original mandate with the qualification that the mandate is subject to the availability of funds, which we have now made available. While the committee's environmental cluster received the most devastating cuts, the transportation cluster also received some notable cuts as well, and let me turn to that. In addition to finalizing the termination of the DC circulator, the FY26 proposed budget begins the process of winding down the DC streetcar. Just 2 years ago, the committee delayed funding for the Benning Road expansion to encourage the executive to develop a more strategic vision for a more comprehensive streetcar network. In that time, however, it seems the executive has moved in a different direction and has decided to end service in the next 2 years and to pivot to a, quote, next generation streetcar. It is unclear if a next generation streetcar is meaningfully different than this generation's bus. Whatever that next generation streetcar looks like, for the next 2 years, the transit options along H Street and the Benning Road corridor are set to worsen just as potential investment in the long vacant RFK campus gets underway. The residents and visitors who travel along this stretch of roadway deserve a more thoughtful approach to transportation planning. So in support of that goal, the committee report proposes setting aside $250,000 in capital funds within the streetcar project to plan for the future transit along the H Street and Benning Road corridor. But there is an even more fundamental issue with the mayor's approach to mass transit. The mayor's budget would adjust the citywide capital funding for bus priority from a 5-year $92.4 million investment to a 6-year $73 million investment, both shrinking the total investment into bus improvements and stretching that reduced amount across an additional fiscal year. In essence, the district would be slated to receive fewer improvements and on a delayed timeline. Yet the road paving money is intact, and we somehow have millions of dollars available in capital funding for a stadium deal to include 8,000 parking spots. We call it bus service, but if we want buses to actually serve DC residents, the district must invest in infrastructure upgrades like bus only, like the name bus only implies, as well as bulb outs. The enforcement tools like automated enforcement cameras that can help improve service. The committee reallocates $30.5 million in unallotted funding within the bus priority program across the capital improvement plan, ensuring that upgrades to bus lanes and the signal priority system can continue at the pace that's needed. There are some components of the proposed budget that deserve praise. The relatively poor state of sidewalks in the district has emerged as a consistent theme across the last two budget and performance oversight seasons. So I'm sure members of this committee are pleased to see continued investments in pedestrian infrastructure with nearly $13.8 million in additional investments for sidewalk improvements across the CIP. The capital budget for the alley repairs and for maintenance received a net increase of $10.3 million in capital funding, a $2.3 million enhancement to the capital bike share capital project in FY26, brings total capital funding for the station expansion and asset replacement up nearly $13 million, ensuring the nation's fastest growing bicycle sharing program can offer fun, safe, convenient, active transportation as an option. And despite the district's exit from offering its own transit services by way of the circulator or streetcar, the district's contribution to WMATA is fully funded, including 24/7 bus service on select routes. It's critical investment if we're going to defend our title as the best system in America. We also identified $250,000 to continue the district's highly successful and popular e-bike incentive program. I've been stopped many times out in the community by people who have benefited from this program, and it has dramatically improved how people are able to get around. To further enhance the district's capacity for urban forestry and tree planting efforts, the committee report reestablishes the tree planting capital project funding at $425,000 in FY26. Committee report proposes taking significant action to continue holding dangerous drivers accountable. First, the committee report would fully fund nearly all the safety provisions of the Strengthening Traffic Enforcement Education Responsibility Amendment Act of 2024, also known as the STEER Act. The STEER Act has been a transformative tool to get dangerous drivers off our roads and streets and to hold them accountable. The committee previously funded a portion of this law in FY25, enabling the Office of the Attorney General to sue repeated traffic offenders in court, working around a longstanding gap in enforcement resulting from an incomplete reciprocity agreements with neighboring states. OAG has already brought 12 lawsuits under the law, including 4 new ones filed just yesterday. Good timing, AG. The committee also funded a provision that prevented the issuance of tickets against stolen vehicles, helping residents avoid the inconvenience of disputing tickets when dealing in the aftermath of a crime. For FY26, the committee report identifies sufficient funding for one of the core safety components of STEER, the immobilization framework. For too long, district's traffic enforcement system has focused on the ability to pay rather than the underlying driving behavior and safety. Under current law, you can rack up as many violations for speeding as you like, and as long as you pay off those tickets, the district has no recourse against you, no more. Under the immobilization framework funded for FY26, vehicles that receive too many speeding tickets within a 6-month window will now be eligible for booting and towing. Release of the vehicle will be contingent on the payment of the outstanding fine and the successful completion of a driver's safety course. This also speaks to a longstanding frustration for residents as the city has never prioritized dangerous driving in its enforcement, opting instead for a more random approach to booting and towing, otherwise known as immobilization. The committee report also identifies funding to modernize the district's response to drunk driving, including its ignition interlock program. Several years ago, the committee identified several information sharing gaps between the Department of Motor Vehicles, the Office of the Attorney General, and the DC Superior Court with respect to license suspensions resulting from either an arrest or conviction. The STEER Act included several updates to that law to improve the coordination in the wake of an arrest or conviction related to driving under the influence. Together, the committee report identifies and proposes allocating $7.1 million in funding all of the safety components of STEER, which includes $600,000 from the Committee on Public Works and Operations to fund additional components of the immobilization framework program for booting, towing, and impoundment. I want to thank Councilmember Nadeau for her partnership. Also, the committee report advances the district towards safer streets by fully funding the Public Life and Activity Zone Amendment, the Plaza Act of 2024. This was a law the council passed that requires DDOT to create a public life and activity zones program, and as part of that program, identify and plan how best to pedestrianize corridors across the district that can be closed to vehicle traffic for 24 cumulative hours each week. DDOT will be required to launch one of those corridors by March of next year. The committee report identifies and proposes allocating $112,000 in FY26 and $1.5 million over the financial plan for those 3 corridors. The committee report also proposes allocating $172,000 to implement a block party pre-authorization application program and expedited block party block party application program. These investments will ensure that as we continue to create new opportunities for neighborhoods and communities beyond downtown DC, residents can find and create vibrant gathering spaces for civic events, entertainment, dining, and recreation. And we all really enjoy a good block party. So how do we pay for all of this? In addition to the usual work of identifying vacant positions, vacant savings, and underspending in certain categories, the committee could draw from without impacting core agency functions. The report proposes two subtitles that would modestly raise revenue. The first adjusts a number of fees administered by the Department of Motor Vehicles. Most significantly, the subtitle increases registration fees for passenger vehicles, commercial vehicles, and trailers. The fees associated with each of these vehicle types is a function of their shipping weight. The subtitle lowers the fee for the lowest weight class, but progressively increases the fees for heavier weight classes. Our rationale here is that the heavier the vehicle is, the more roadway wear it causes. The other notable DMV fee for this report would be a slight increase in the fee for residential parking permits. The subtitle increases the base fee for RPP and progressively increases the fee for second, third, and fourth subsequent vehicles, all at the same address. The committee also moved a subtitle that increased the public space fee for construction debris receptacles, dumpsters, which are issued in a month-long increments. The report not only increases the fee for maintaining these receptacles, but eliminates the price distinction between commercial and residential properties. Together, these relatively modest fee increases generated a net revenue of only about $926,000 in FY26 and should incentivize, though, the prompt removal of those dumpsters consuming public space, returning residential neighborhood parking. However, the committee's ability to celebrate some of those notable investments within the transportation cluster is undermined by the devastating cuts wrought out in the environmental cluster. This approach fails to appreciate the urgency with respect to the need to mitigate our contributions to climate change, while also making the district a cleaner, safer, and more heat and weather resilient place to live. But these investments also save people real money. The innovative work of DOEE, the DC Sustainable Energy Utility, and the DC Green Bank in support of electrification, weatherization upgrades, and solar energy generation in the aggregate has saved and will continue to save district residents millions of dollars in their utility bills. The DC Green Bank has delivered over $75 million in direct investment and unlocked over $760 million in investment from private sources. We're talking about building new housing and preserving existing affordable housing. The goal of these commitments is to ensure no one is left behind, and the benefits from renewable energy and electrification are not solely reserved for those who can afford it, and leaving low-income households breathing unhealthy and dirty air indoors while paying higher and higher costs on their bills. There remains a tremendous opportunity for the district at large to more aggressively embrace generating as much electricity as possible within our borders, reducing the amount we all need to purchase from regional generation. The recent Pepco and Washington Gas increases in our rates are clear evidence of the district's status as a consumer of around 83 times more energy than it produces, requires both short-term and long-term fixes. For Pepco, over-reliance on fossil fuels at the regional level is driving rates higher for multiple states, including DC. Annually, district residents send hundreds of millions of dollars out of state to purchase electricity. In contrast, every kilowatt hour generated in DC on solar panels installed in DC rooftops or in DC communities by DC companies is growth in a new industry, which should be part of our broader growth agenda. This is the energy that DC residents can own and benefit from instead of being beholden to the electricity market's whims. Every time the SETF is slashed and every year when the district government exempts itself from our own renewable portfolio standard is another example where we actively undermine the growth of this industry in favor of the status quo. This is supposed to be a growth budget, but you cannot grow DC with more air and water pollution, more traffic, more dangerous drivers, more emissions, and more broken promises on clean energy investments. That's not being clear-eyed about tough decisions. It's literally just kicking the can down the road. Our committee goals are growth-oriented, generating more clean electricity here in the city. It's a billion-dollar opportunity to create many new DC jobs and reduce monthly bills. Getting people out of their cars and onto public transit is good for business. When the air in our homes and the water we drink is clean, people put down roots. When drivers slow down through design or enforcement, people feel safe to spend more time exploring their neighborhood. These will be the underpinnings of every successful city over the next 50 years. So I want to end by saying that the committee listened to DC residents and stakeholders who said that the proposed cuts in the mayor's budget do not represent DC values and would take us backwards, not forward. And while we couldn't fix everything, the committee report fills the gaps on many of the key investment opportunities overlooked by the mayor. I want to thank all the residents, the advocates, the stakeholders who showed up to make your voices heard. I'm proud of where the committee report landed on this budget and believe it reflects what district residents want in ensuring we maintain our climate commitments, keep our roads and streets safe, and guarantees that we can take some big, bold steps to make our city work for all of us. With that, let me turn to my colleagues if there are any comments. Councilmember Lewis George.
Good afternoon. I want to begin by thanking the committee staff for its hard work and my colleague, Chairperson Allen, for his leadership and efforts. As we said throughout this process, this is a tough budget, but we remain committed to investing in priorities that truly serve our residents. I especially want to thank you for your commitment to enhancing public facilities. The transfer of capital funds to the Facilities Committee will support critical repairs at Eastern Market, expand and modernize Rumsey Pool, fully fund construction of the Southwest Tour Center, provide much needed upgrades at Garfield Park. These investments reflect a shared priority between our committees, enhancing public infrastructure equitably across the district. I also want to thank the committee for your close partnership and collaboration in the joint recommendation with the Facilities Committee to strike the mayor's subtitle, the Net Zero Energy Ready Building Code Amendment Act, which would substantially undermine the district's climate goals and commitment at a time when we should be strengthening them and not backtracking. This year's cuts touch many core services. I want to commend the Transportation Environment Committee for working diligently to strengthen agency budgets under these tight constraints. Completing the work on a shortened timeline made it even more challenging. One of the most difficult challenges was responding to the executive's proposed 24% cut to the Department of Energy and Environment. These kind of cuts, even when framed as fiscally necessary, ultimately send the wrong message that in times of strain, environmental progress and our children's future are negotiable. That's why I was heartened to see this committee take steps to mitigate that harm, including a 3.1 million investment in the Sustainable Energy Trust Fund. This funding, along with the key subtitle modifications, is essential to achieving our climate goals and ensuring the equity gap in access to safe electrified homes does not become insurmountable. When we talk about public safety, this investment matters. All residents deserve clean, safe housing, free from toxins, pollutants, and combustibles. I also want to highlight and thank you all for several critical investments by the committee. The restoration of $30.5 million for the bus priority program, helping ensure DC's busiest commuter routes remain efficient and equitable. Funding the safety provisions of the STEER Act, bringing us closer to holding reckless drivers accountable with critical DMV updates. A $106 million investment in safety improvements along the high impact network, alongside the $45.6 million already approved for Vision Zero projects. These reflect a strong and necessary commitment to pedestrian safety and making our streets accessible to all users. I look forward to continued collaboration with DDOT through oversight to ensure that robust community engagement remains central to its work. I remain deeply concerned about the pace of lead service line replacements and the lack of funding for lead-free DC legislation, which has strong council support. My office has heard from many constituents facing exposure to lead service in lines and paint who are looking for help to keep their families safe. I look forward to continuing the work on this with the committee. I appreciate the progress made through the committee's partnership with the Health Committee, and I'm committed to continuing this work so that lead remediation receives the attention and funding it deserves. I recognize the incredibly difficult choices this committee faced and want to thank you for striving to protect our communities wherever possible. As we move forward, I hope we can continue working together to build a budget that reflects not just what we can afford today, but what we owe future generations in safety, health, and sustainability. Thank you again, Chairperson Allen and committee staff, for preparing this report and proposal. I look forward to supporting it this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Councilor Lewis George, and thank you for the partnership between our committees as well as being a member of this committee. Really appreciate that. Any other discussion? Councilor Anderson?
Thank you, Chair Allen. All of the council members were handed a particularly challenging budget this year, but your task was especially difficult. I think the majority of people who stopped by my office over this budget season came to ask the council to restore the cuts to the district's transportation and environment programs. I agree with you that the idea presented in the proposed budget for this committee's agencies that the district must set aside somehow a commitment to a healthier, more resilient future was short-sighted. There are more thoughtful ways for us to respond to such pressures that both preserve our current goals, rather, but also serve current residents and are considerate of the climate and environmental challenges future residents will face. I see that you have done your best in this budget to thread that needle in the proposal that we have before us. I want to highlight a few things. First, the Green Bank, which I believe is an important tool in the district's environmental protection and development arsenal. I've seen completed projects funded by the Green Bank and understand its role in providing gap financing that creates resilient, beautiful buildings here in the district. I'm frustrated that the executive doesn't value this program as it deserves and reduced its funding for its budget by 50%. I support your proposal to allocate $250,000 to the Green Bank to explore a green bonds program. I've had some conversations with former Councilmember Che on this, and so I'm interested to see where this goes. The bus priority lanes really do make a difference for people who regularly take the bus. Bus is one of our public transit options that is accessible to every resident in the district. And so thank you for holding that funding as close as possible to level. Sometimes I do question the level of community engagement prior to us installing priority bus lanes. But to DDOT's credit, I think that they have been receptive to some of the concerns that we have flagged for them. We funded key provisions of the Stair Amendment Act, which, we've already seen some success in terms of the civil enforcement authority that we granted to the Attorney General, and I'm excited that more of the law's requirements will go into effect, particularly the driver immobilization framework and the driver safety curriculum, which were also proposed in bills that I introduced that were included in the final version of STEER. We restored the tree planting fund, and on a day like today, this whole week where it has been, temperature 90 but feels like 106. We need more trees, especially in parts of the areas of the city with high heat indexes, especially in wards 1, 5, and 6. And I'm also happy to see that we put the $11 million to support the Anacostia River dredging and cleanup. I'm skeptical about swimming in the Anacostia, but let's get there one day. So there's so much more to cover, and Councilmember LaGeorge said a lot as well. But I want to thank you and your staff for the effort that you did exert here to protect our vital environmental and transportation programs, and congratulate you on this. I do have 2 questions. Okay, so the first is around the proposed elimination of open streets and replacing it with permanent plazas that were envisioned in your Plaza Amendment Act. As you know, open streets is incredibly popular. People and businesses look forward to this every year, and it draws thousands of people who are walking, biking, skating, rollerblading with friends along the Georgia Avenue 7th Street corridor. I understand the goal of creating permanent spaces, but I wonder if those spaces will have the same pull as open street activations. And can you share more about your thought process in terms of the trade-offs there?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I love a good open street too. We actually have one coming up in Ward 6 and this weekend, this Saturday. So I'll be out there. The decision that we're looking at is the budget only had $700,000. When we asked the DDOT director, what do you plan to do with that? There was no plan for it. They said maybe they'd hold 1, maybe 2 small open streets sometime in the future, but that was it. So our trade-offs, and I think we struggled throughout this budget to think through where are different trade-offs, is we can maintain $700,000 to create one day closure of a street, or we could fund the law we passed, which will actually create year-round pedestrian activities. When I think about the way that pedestrianization gets people out onto the sidewalk and the streets, supports our local businesses at Eastern Market, for example. Or if we look at the holiday market downtown, tens of thousands of people, strong support for our local businesses. They are huge draws, and where we've seen other cities lead in this way, where they've actually converted some spaces into more pedestrianized plazas, we really see, frankly, a great benefit for our local businesses. Residents love it, and it kind of transforms the space. So that was really the trade-off, was rather than seeing this as, let's do these one discrete events, let's create something that's more permanent, that's year-round, that generates more. If the funding becomes available, that they want to continue to do kind of some one-offs from time to time, I think we'd all support that too. But this was an opportunity to really see how can we start building this into more who we are as a city.
Okay. My second question is the proposal proposes to strike the net zero energy subtitle. Now, the FIS for this in the BSA said that without the changes proposed in the subtitle as introduced, 3 capital improvement projects will require additional funding to meet current net zero requirements. Congress Heights modernization, the new community center at Crummell School, and the Hillcrest Indoor Aquatic Center. It went on to say projects have not been adjusted in the proposed budget and financial plan, indicating that other component costs of the project have been supplanted any costs to achieve the net zero standard in the current law. So your report said that there was no FIS associated with striking this subtitle, which may be true, but I'm worried that the executive will essentially say, because we are striking the subtitle, that these 3 projects might be delayed. Did ORA or any of the agencies involved indicate that there might be non-monetary consequences to striking this subtitle?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So this was an area where we actually collaborated with Councilor Lewis George and her committee on. Some of it's a reflection of going back to the agencies and negotiating the FIS down to where you see no FIS. And I might actually draw Councilor Lewis George into this if she'd like to add some thoughts on this from her committee's perspective. But really, I think it's a reflection of the work between our 2 committees and then the agency directors and the CFO to kind of get that FIS down to where it is, which allows us to strike it. But Councilor Lewis George, anything you wanted to add from the Committee on Facilities side of this?
Yeah, so as a result, in order to right-size those projects to comply, we put 2.2 million for the community center at Crummell for Ward 5, and then 2.6 for the Fort Davis Recreation Center in Ward 7, and then 5 million for the Congress Heights Recreation Center modernization in Ward 8. So we basically funded them at the level to maintain their compliance with the greener government buildings, to take into account that.
Yep. So my understanding between the work of the 2 committees is there would be no rationale that they could suggest for a delay.
Okay.
And so I believe that we're all good.
All right,
But-
I just want to get that on the record.
Yeah.
Because, sometimes they like to come to things in the 11th
They
hour.
did say they needed 2 FTEs. I'm kidding.
Good work to you and to the staff and the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate Councilor Henderson and really appreciate your continued partnership as well and all the things we do here in this committee and the ways we have been able to work together. So thank you. Councilor Parker is with us online and virtually. And Councilor Parker, I wanted to turn to you now.
Thank you, Chairperson Allen. I too want to congratulate you and your team for advancing what I believe is a strong budget report and recommendations. The mayor's proposed cuts to our environmental programs were particularly severe, and I appreciate your efforts to save what you could via the committee. It is no secret that the district and our communities are facing a climate challenge and crisis, and that is felt most distinctly in wards 5, 7, and 8. While I wish we were doubling down on our investments in a healthier and greener city, I'm grateful that programs like Healthy Homes will continue thanks to your efforts. On the transportation side, I also commend and support the committee's major investments, including funding the Plaza Act to push the district to create more pedestrian spaces. The most vibrant cities in the world have long been moving in this direction in no small part because pedestrian-friendly spaces are business-friendly spaces. I also appreciate the committee's work to fund the remaining components of the STEER Act, an investment that extends the council's efforts to bolster traffic enforcement, which is a matter of public safety. I also appreciate the committee's work to restore the bulk of the mayor's cuts to the bus priority program. I've said it once and I'll say it again. Delivering efficient and frequent bus service to Ward 5 is my top transportation priority. Buses serve many of our most vulnerable residents, and it provides an accessible and safe option for families with young children all the way through our senior residents who are less mobile. I also appreciate a couple of key investments that the mayor proposed and the committee preserved, especially the initial investment in planning a safer Rhode Island Avenue corridor and the decision to fund quick build projects on high injury network corridors. Finally, I'm especially grateful for 2 requests of mine that the committee funded. $75,000 to establish a water source for Wangari Gardens and $200,000 for retaining wall and drainage repairs on the Metropolitan Branch Trail at New York Avenue. I understand that we weren't quite able to get one further request across the finish line in the committee, and that was a $1 million investment to advance a trail connection between the MPT and the Maryland border. But I'm hoping that we can work together between now and first reading to secure that funding, as I believe it advances a critical and shared priority. I do have one question I continue to be concerned about the number of air quality division FTEs within DOEE. As you know, Chairperson, we have some of air quality permits in Ward 5 that have been pending since I came into office and some well before that. Could you speak to the committee's work to better understand what's behind those delays and how the limited staffing at DOEE contributes to our environmental harm? And I would just say, my team has pushed on this, and we haven't been able to get as much traction as I would hope. So we'll love your partnership here as well.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Parker, and would certainly be happy to continue partnering with you on getting more answers on that. My answer might be a little bit global and not as specific on that one program, but I'm happy to work with you and your team afterwards. One of the things that we certainly have found is that and I mentioned this in my opening, as the city has had to respond to the congressional action of freezing our budget, or the budget we're in right now, FY25 at FY24 levels, and then having to put in the hiring freeze, the agencies in this committee's purview have been hit pretty hard because we have not had, for example, the exemption to hiring that public safety or education has. So we have tried to press our agency directors about when they are asking for and filing for exemptions to be able to, from that hiring freeze. But I know that the hiring freeze, on top of just the natural attrition you have of some people who either are retiring or find another job somewhere, has actually hit our agencies pretty hard. And so I'm happy to follow up with you to look deeper into that. But I note that both DOE, DDOT, and DMV have all been hit by that because of the hiring freeze. And again, I'm not assigning the blame on that one to the mayor. That is the forced reaction that has had to happen from the executive branch to the congressional action.
No, I appreciate that. I would just say I will take you up on that offer. And to our friends at DOE, I know this budget rolls back significant investments that I think causes undue harm. But our commitment to facing our climate crisis is not just around monetary investments, but actually holding businesses and institutions accountable for the environmental harm they cause. So thank you. I just wanted to make sure that was on the record, as I do plan to follow up on it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I look forward to following that. And I'll just note that while you were speaking there, my staff updated me that there was at least one staffer, for example, that got stuck in a hiring process when the hiring freeze took effect. So that, I think, absolutely does contribute, but happy to work with you and partner afterwards. And I appreciate your comments and partnership. All right. With that, thank you all very much for your comments. And as I think everybody noted as well, while I'm proud of what the committee has been able to put back together again, it has not put it all back. And we still have a lot of work to go at the full council, and appreciate everybody's comments to that. So let me now move to approve the report and recommendations of the Committee on Transportation and the Environment on fiscal year 2026 budget for agencies under its purview, with leave for staff to make technical, editorial, and conforming changes. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much. I also want to thank, frankly, as all of us know, how many people are involved in getting to that little vote we just took. And also to do so in such an abbreviated fashion has been very difficult. Councilor Parker, I think your microphone might still be on, by the way. There. Thank you. No problem. But I want to make sure I gave a special shout out and thank you at the Indefatigable Budget Office. Joe Wolf, Ann Phelps, Avril Caraway, and Budget Director Jim Budoff have just been fantastic. And I know you're having to pull duty for every single committee out there. So thank you all so much for the incredible work you've done. And I'm not sure if you actually went to bed last night. In the Office of General Counsel, I want to thank Zach Walter, who has just been a stalwart and consistent support as we have worked through and with him frequently. In our Secretary's office, Secretary Howard and the entire team, including our incredible support services office, which arrived early and stayed late to help with those hearings, especially on one Friday night. So a huge gratitude to our support services. And of course, to my team that makes all of this actually work. Kevin Whitfield, the director for our committee, Connor Fagan, Anthony Thomas Davis, Kate Mitchell, Eric Salmi, Antonio Nunez, everyone on my entire staff that's really chipped in, as this is an all hands on deck. We also have multiple interns that have been helping out this year. So Natalia Frieden, Catherine Miller, and Aiden Sokolov. Thank you very much for being a part of this journey. And so it's wonderful to have our interns helping out. Next, let me quickly turn to our nominations for DC Water and Sewer Authority Board of Directors before us. Unless anyone objects, I'd love to move all three in block. And with the thumbs ups, I appreciate it. So, Chairman Mendelson introduced proposed resolutions PR 26-171, 26-173, and 26-174 at the request of the mayor on April 9th, 2025. The committee held a roundtable on all nominations on May 8th, 2025, except for Dr. Jimmy Ortiz, who was unable to attend, but met with me on record to discuss his qualifications and his experience. PRs 26-171 and 26-174 would appoint Rob Hawkins and Dr. Alexander McPhail as alternate members of the DC Water and Sewer Authority Board of Directors for terms to end on September 12th, 2028, and PR 26-173 would appoint Dr. Jimmy Ortiz as alternate member to the District of Columbia Water and Sewer Authority Board of Directors for a term to end September 16th, 2027. All nominees, if confirmed, would be fulfilling remainders of existing four-year terms. Mr. Rob Hawkins currently serves as senior advisor in Berlin Rosen's Washington, D.C. municipal lobbying practice. Previously, he was a partner and chair of the D.C. government relations practice at Nelson Mullins. Before entering the private sector, Mr. Hawkins held several positions within district government from 2008 to 2017, including as legislative and committee staff here at the council. Mr. Hawkins has extensive board experience, much of which is connected with the District of Columbia. He has served as a board member of the Anacostia BID, commissioner at the Commission on Selection and Tenure of Administrative Law Judges, a steering committee member for the DC Affairs Community at the DC Bar, team lead for the Mayor's Coronavirus Reopening Committee, vice chair of the Mayor's Working Groups on Jobs, Wages, and Benefits, and the director of the DC Greens Board. Mr. Hawkins earned his Bachelor's of Arts from Virginia Tech and his Juris Doctorate from the University of Pittsburgh, and he is a Ward 3 resident. Dr. Jimmy Ortiz currently serves as the president and CEO of Zitro 360 Group, LLC, which is an international government relations and educational consulting firm. Prior to founding the organization, he oversaw global business for International Bridge. Until 2024, he oversaw international relations at the U.S. Postal Service in Washington, D.C. Dr. Ortiz started his career as a letter carrier on the night shift in New York City and has held close to 24 policy, operational, managerial, and business development positions, including in New York, Puerto Rico, and Washington, D.C. He's held a number of leadership assignments at USPS, including acting executive director of international postal affairs. In 2016, he was part of the U.S. Postal Service operational delegation that reestablished direct mail exchanges between Cuba and the U.S. Dr. Ortiz serves or has served as a member of several boards and advisory committees, including the UPU Express Mail Service Cooperative Board, president of Prospanica, D.C., chair of two committees of the Postal Union of the Americas, Spain and Portugal, and the advisory board of the Hispanic Scholarship Fund, D.C., and Grupo 21. Dr. Ortiz earned his associate degree accounting from State University of New York, his Bachelor of Arts in Industrial and Government Accounting from City University of New York, and his Master's of Science in Administration from Central Michigan University, and his PhD in International Business Administration from Universidad Filadelfia. He is a Ward 6 resident. And finally, Dr. Alexander McPhail has more than 35 years of professional experience, of which 33 years were with the World Bank. After retiring from the World Bank in 2021, he has been an independent consultant in the water sector. At the World Bank, Dr. McPhail specialized in the water sector, including water supply and sanitation, resource planning, conservation, utility management, financial strategies, policy development, and stakeholder consultation. Dr. McPhail is an experienced team leader, having formed and led over 20 multidisciplinary teams during his World Bank career, working on over 75 projects. Dr. McPhail also served 6 years as a member of the board of directors for the DC Water and Sewer Authority previously. During this previous tenure, he chaired the Customer Service Committee and was a member of the Operations and Audit Committees. And as a board member, he regularly helped develop the utilities policies and procedures, from strategic directions to promoting the procurement of minority-owned contractors. He also helped to guide the utilities over $2 billion 10-year capital program. And while on the board, Dr. McPhail initiated a low-income bill assistance fund and led a board initiative to replace lead service lines. He serves as a board member for the Water Research Foundation, the Asset Management Committee, and the American Water Works Association. Dr. McPhail earned his Bachelor's of Science in Business Administration from Portland State University, and both his Bachelor's of Arts in Social Change and Development and his PhD in Environmental Engineering from Johns Hopkins University, and he is a Ward 4 resident. I was impressed with all of our candidates during our roundtable and meeting. Based on their background and experience, as well as their testimony during the roundtable, I am supporting all of their nominations today. Are there any comments or questions from colleagues? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Let me now move to approve the reports and prints for proposed resolutions 26-171, 26-173, and 26-174 with leave for staff to make technical, editorial, and conforming changes. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? I think that was Councilor Parker saying aye, not no.
Aye.
Okay. All right, then the ayes have it unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, this is going to conclude the committee's additional meeting. There being no further business before the committee. The time is now 1:23 p.m. on the same day we started. This additional meeting of the Committee on Transportation and the Environment is now adjourned.